It began with a live stream no one saw coming, and a voice no one could forget. A man in uniform staring straight into the camera said calmly, "Your government is stealing from you. If we don't stop them now, this nation will collapse."
My fellow Tanzanians, with a great pain in my heart, whether this is going on in our country, I have tried to reflect a lot. Until the next time, I reach to share with God that while I see a very big danger that is in front of us as a nation.
Within minutes, the video spread across Tanzania like wildfire. The man was Captain John Charles Tesha, a weapons instructor from the Air Force, and he had just called for the military to overthrow the government. In a country that hadn't seen a soldier defy power in 60 years, it was like lightning in daylight. Within 2 days, Tesha vanished, discharged, silenced, erased. But his voice lingered, because deep down, Tanzanians knew he wasn't crazy. He was right. Their democracy had been replaced by a dynasty, and their hope by fear. What happened next would expose not just one leader, but an entire system. Let's talk about it in detail. It's funny how history doesn't always begin with elections or wars. Sometimes it begins with a phone held upright in someone's trembling hand. That's how it started in Tanzania. A shaky live stream, the faint hum of a ceiling fan, a man in uniform looking straight into the lens, calm, composed, angry, but not loud. Your government is stealing from you. If we don't stop them now, this nation will collapse. It was October 4th, 2025, a quiet Saturday afternoon. The kind where markets buzz lazily and boda zigzag through traffic, their horns merging with street chatter. And suddenly, all across Dar es Salaam, every phone screen glowed with the same face, Captain John Charles Tesha, a weapons instructor in the Tanzania Air Force. People blinked, unsure if it was real. A soldier? Speaking publicly? In Tanzania? It felt impossible. Soldiers didn't speak, they obeyed. Politics was for civilians. Silence was for soldiers. That unwritten rule had held the country together since independence. But Tesha broke it with one sentence that sliced through decades of obedience. And here's the thing, he didn't sound reckless. He sounded deliberate, like a man who had weighed his words for years and finally decided to let them go. Every syllable carried exhaustion, not the kind that comes from fighting enemies, but from watching your own country rot from the inside. Within minutes, the live stream was everywhere. TikTok, WhatsApp, Instagram, Tanzanians were forwarding it like gospel. Teenagers who had never cared about politics were quoting him on memes. Even government supporters, the quiet ones, watched it twice, because deep down, something in his tone felt too real to dismiss. Authorities tried to delete it, but you can't erase what the people have already turned into memory. The video had already crossed borders: Nairobi, Kampala, Kigali, and even Lusaka. It wasn't just a Tanzanian story anymore, it was an African one. A continent watching one of its stable democracies suddenly trembles under truth. 2 days later, the Air Force announced that Tesha had been discharged for violating the chain of command. That was it. No arrest photos, no press conference, no further information. He had vanished as if swallowed by the same shadows he warned about. But silence doesn't erase, it amplifies. Across the country, whispers grew louder. Where is Tesha? Some called him reckless, others called him a hero, and the government's silence only made him legendary. For 60 years, Tanzania's military had kept its distance from politics. Now, that line had been crossed, and no one knew what would follow. Tesha's act wasn't just defiance, it was a diagnosis. He was saying what everyone already knew but couldn't dare say. The government had stopped serving the people and started serving itself. That moment didn't just expose a leader, it exposed an entire illusion of stability. Tanzania, the model democracy of East Africa, suddenly looked fragile. The kind of fragile that makes you ask, what kind of system could push a disciplined soldier to risk everything, his career, his freedom, maybe even his life, just to tell his country the truth?
I think within the course of 1 year, I've shown the women power that I led the country in the same way men did, and in some circumstances more than they did. So,
to understand why Captain Tesha's words hit the nation like lightning, you have to rewind a few years, back to March 2021. the day President John Pombe Magufuli died after 18 mysterious days of public absence. His death didn't just mark the end of an era, it cracked open the soul of Tanzania. Magufuli was a paradox, the kind of leader who defied simple labels. To his supporters, he was the man who fought foreign corporations, built roads with Tanzanian hands, and told the West to keep its aid if it came with conditions. To his critics, he was a strong man who jailed journalists and denied COVID's existence. But love him or hate him, he made Tanzanians believe in something, national pride, however rough-edged it was. So, when he died, the country stood in suspended disbelief. Then, like a sudden plot twist, the quiet, almost invisible Vice President, Samia Suluhu Hassan, stepped into power. For a moment, it felt historic. East Africa had its first female president. The world cheered. Western headlines called her the gentle reformer. NGOs praised her for restoring democracy. Diplomats filled her inbox with congratulations. And to be fair, at first she did look like the antidote to Magufuli's storm. She reopened newspapers, freed journalists, spoke softly where her predecessor had thundered. Her demeanor felt refreshing, controlled, articulate, and modern. Tanzanians thought maybe, just maybe, this was the turn. That after decades of one-party dominance, something real might finally change. But you know what they say about smiles in politics? Sometimes they hide knives. Behind Samia's careful tone stood the same political fortress that had shaped every president since independence. Chama Cha Mapinduzi CCM, the party of the revolution, the eternal government. A structure so old, so rooted, that no leader could survive without bending to its will. It was less a political party now, and more a self-sustaining organism, fed by loyalty, lubricated by contracts, protected by fear. Samia soon found herself cornered by the very system that had made her president. Reformers vanished from her cabinet. Loyalists of former presidents Kikwete, Mwinyi, and their network of businessmen reappeared, quietly taking back control of the state's veins. By mid-2022, it was clear the wind of change had turned into a recycled breeze. The government began censoring unpatriotic reporting. Activists were told to respect national unity. And foreign investors, those very Western corporations Magufuli had kicked out, were welcomed back with open arms. It was a transformation, all right, but in reverse. The gentle reformer had become the smiling mask of the same old machine, and Tanzanians started noticing. The market vendors, the boda drivers, the teachers, they all began whispering the same thing. Hakuna tofauti. There's no difference. The woman who promised change had become the system itself.
Yeah, I think it's really inappropriate and unacceptable to ban the main opposition party from elections. How can you have an election without the main parties? I think imprisonment also of the opposition leaders was not necessary. I mean,
so when Tesha went live in 2025, calling out the corruption, the arrogance, and the betrayal, people didn't see a mutineer. They saw a mirror. They saw a soldier saying what the nation had been too afraid to admit. But that still leaves the next question hanging heavy in the air. What exactly is this machine, the CCM, that keeps swallowing every leader who dares to change Tanzania? Chama Cha Mapinduzi, the party of the revolution, was born in 1977, a fusion of two liberation movements under Julius Nyerere, the philosopher-president who dreamed of unity through socialism. He imagined a Tanzania bound by equality, not greed, a country where leadership meant service, not privilege. In those early years, the party wasn't a machine, it was a mission. People believed in it the way they believed in religion. But power has this funny way of outliving purpose. Over time, Nyerere's ideals hardened into routine. Routine turned into entitlement, and entitlement became control. The CCM that once united a nation gradually became the gatekeeper of everything: money, media, military, and meaning. By the 1990s, multi-party democracy arrived, but it was democracy in costume. Opposition parties existed, yes, but without resources, without airtime, without protection. They were like actors invited to a play whose ending had already been written. Elections came and went, but CCM never left. It survived scandals, economic collapse, and leadership changes, not because it was loved, but because it controlled the very system meant to check it.
Now to East Africa, where Tanzania's main opposition party said on Tuesday it did not recognize results announced so far from a weekend presidential and parliamentary election due to what it described as widespread rigging.
When Magufuli entered the scene in 2015, he tried to challenge that structure. He slashed salaries, fired corrupt officials on live television, and demanded that Western mining firms pay their fair share. For a brief moment, the fortress shook. The people cheered. The elites panicked, and when he died, they exhaled in relief. That's the context Samia walked into, and maybe that's why she never stood a chance. The deep state that had tolerated Magufuli's populism for 5 years reclaimed its throne within months of his death. Businessmen like Rostam Aziz and retired generals returned to shape policy from the shadows. CCM wasn't just advising her government, it was running it. The result? Tanzania turned into what scholars call a hybrid state, democratic on paper, authoritarian in practice. Parliament sessions became performances. Opposition members were silenced through lawsuits, and any journalist too curious about government contracts found their license suspended pending review. CCM had perfected the art of invisible power. It didn't need coups or guns anymore. It ruled through fatigue, through bureaucracy, through that slow suffocation where people simply give up believing things can change. So when Captain Tesha called it out, he wasn't rebelling against one woman, he was confronting an empire, a political organism older than him, wealthier than him, and ruthless enough to erase him. And yet, somehow, his message pierced through it, because every empire, no matter how eternal it pretends to be, eventually rots from within. The question now is, when silence becomes law and power becomes permanent, what happens to the citizens who still dare to speak? Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. By 2024, Tanzania had entered what people quietly started calling the Year of Shadows. You could feel it in the air, that uneasy silence that hums beneath every conversation, the kind where eyes dart around before a sentence is finished. Something had shifted. The fear that used to hide behind closed doors had spilled into the streets. More than 80 activists, journalists, and opposition members vanished that year. Not arrested, not charged, just gone. Families searched hospitals, morgues, and prisons, carrying faded photos that no one dared to look at too long. The police shrugged. Courts stalled. Government spokespeople simply said, "We have no information."
The 25-year-old artist and content creator was arrested after a TikTok video of him burning the president's photo went viral. He was convicted of cyber harassment and released after paying a fine. A month later, he was abducted.
Jitihada tumefanya mpaka tumechoka sasa hivi. Sehemu zote, vituo vyote vinavyotunza wahalifu, magereza zote, vituo vyote vya polisi, kuanzia ngazi ya kata mpaka ngazi ya wilaya mpaka mkoani, hawatuambii kwamba atapatikana lini, kwa sababu nao pia wanasemaje? Wanasema tunaendelea kutafuta.
The disappearances didn't target chaos. They targeted conscience. Lawyers defending land grab victims. Youth leaders are criticizing foreign mining deals. Radio hosts are asking why fuel prices have doubled while exports have soared. All erased with surgical precision, as if someone had drawn up a list of inconvenient voices and checked them off one by one. Among them was Ali Muhammad Kibao, a human rights lawyer known for defending farmers in Shinyanga against corporate mining seizures. He vanished one morning after a local TV appearance. 4 days later, his body washed up on the coast near Bagamoyo, burned with acid, hands tied. No investigation followed. The message was clear: speak and you vanish. And yet the government insisted that Tanzania remains one of Africa's most stable democracies. Stability had become their favorite word, a convenient lie used to hide the cracks forming underneath. When the Citizen newspaper, one of the few independent outlets left, released a short animated video mocking the government's silence, showing a cartoon president flipping TV channels as families searched for missing loved ones. The regime responded the only way it knew how. It banned the newspaper for 30 days for threatening national unity. National unity, that was their magic phrase. It meant conformity. It meant obedience. It meant don't ask questions. But here's the thing about silence. It doesn't kill resistance. It matures it. Beneath the quiet, a slow, invisible fire was spreading. Students were forming encrypted chat groups. Underground journalists were archiving stories on foreign servers. Even priests and imams began slipping subtle criticisms into sermons. People had started to realize something profound. When justice disappears, so do excuses. And when fear becomes a constant, courage stops feeling optional. It was in this suffocating climate that Captain Tesha decided to speak. To him, the vanishing of citizens wasn't a coincidence. It was the symptom of a deeper sickness, a government that had turned its back on its people to serve private greed. So, when he looked into that camera and said, "This nation will collapse," it wasn't hyperbole, it was a diagnosis. But speaking truth in a system built on silence always has a cost. And as Tesha's video spread across the country, every Tanzanian was left wondering the same haunting question. If they can erase ordinary citizens so easily, what would they do to a soldier who dared to challenge them? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. When Captain John Charles Tesha went live that October afternoon, he wasn't just breaking military protocol, he was breaking a national spell. You could almost feel it, the tension, the disbelief, the collective gasp of a country that suddenly saw one of its own uniformed men saying what everyone had been too scared to whisper. He didn't speak like a mutineer. He spoke like a man cornered by truth. Calm, deliberate, unflinching. The kind of calm that only comes from someone who knows there's no turning back. In his viral broadcast, Tesha did what no journalist, no activist, no politician had dared to do in years. He named names. Not metaphors, not insinuations. Names. Former President Jakaya Kikwete, billionaire tycoon Rostam Aziz, high-ranking figures in Chama cha Mapinduzi, the same invisible empire that had captured Tanzania's democracy from within. He accused them of siphoning billions through fake energy projects and mining contracts signed under the table, protected by Western intermediaries and corporate backdoors. The army must act. Investigate Magufuli's death. Stop the fake election before it destroys us. That was the moment, right there, when his words turned from critique to revolution. It was no longer about corruption. It was about betrayal. Because what Tesha was really saying, between every line, was that Tanzania's sovereignty had been sold. That the dream Julius Nyerere had built, an independent African nation governed by its own conscience, had been traded for comfort and foreign validation.
To beginning with, it was a great shock when I received the message yesterday. But I think all of us, we already had that the uncertainty that our leaders wasn't nowhere to be seen. But I think it's because of the Africans' traditions. They were pretty much maybe waiting for who will be a leader to come in front of the podium and then announce to Tanzania.
To Tesha, John Magufuli wasn't the villain the Western press made him out to be. He was the last true patriot. A flawed man, yes, but one who tried to free Tanzania from dependency. Tesha believed Magufuli didn't just die. He was removed, politically, if not physically, by the very elites he had threatened. Within hours, social media caught fire. Tanzanian youth, especially those frustrated by joblessness, surveillance, and fake elections, found in Tesha a voice that sounded like them. They started calling him Traore wa Tanzania, the Tanzanian Traore, after Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, the young soldier who defied France and expelled foreign troops to reclaim his nation's resources. Suddenly, Tesha's words weren't just political, they were continental. And then, just like that, he disappeared. Nobody, no trial, no footage. Just gone. But silence couldn't bury him. His image began appearing in graffiti across Dar es Salaam, his name scrawled on university walls, on t-shirts, on market stalls. One phrase followed every image: Ujasiri si wasi, courage is not rebellion. His disappearance became his immortality. Students began organizing underground discussions about government accountability. Church youth groups started prayers for those who tell the truth. Even within the military, whispers grew, not of coups, but of conscience. And that's when it hit people. Tesha hadn't sparked chaos. He had sparked clarity. Tanzania's youth, that restless digital generation, had finally realized something their parents were too afraid to admit. Silence isn't peace. Silence is paralysis. And once people understand that, control begins to crack. Still, one question loomed over every conversation, every late-night phone call, every encrypted chat. Could this spirit of defiance, this new heartbeat of courage, actually survive without the man who started it? It turned out, yes, it could survive, and it did. What Captain Tesha started with one live stream became something the government couldn't touch because it didn't live in one man anymore. It lived in millions of screens, whispers, and hearts. His silence became everyone's voice. Then came October 18, 2025. Tanzania was still reeling from Tesha's disappearance when opposition leader John Heche, deputy chairman of Chadema, was detained near the Kenyan border. Normally, that would have been another name lost to bureaucracy, another face swallowed by national security. But this time was different. Heche's phone was live. He was streaming. The officers didn't realize it until the internet had already seen it, and that changed everything. Within an hour, the video spread like wildfire. Kenyans started posting it. Tanzanians reposted it. Youth across East Africa were commenting, tagging, and translating. Within hours, crowds gathered at the border. Not soldiers, not rioters, just ordinary people holding phones, chanting, "Let him go." No one had guns, only cameras. No one had orders, only conviction. 6 hours later, the impossible happened. The government backed down. Heche was released. And in that single act, the people discovered something that dictators fear more than uprisings: visibility. Because visibility is power. It's sunlight, and sunlight kills shadows. Tesha's message had evolved. What started as a soldier's defiance had become a generation's awakening. Tanzanians realized that they didn't need to march in the streets to fight oppression. They just needed to make oppression visible. Every post, every live stream, every whispered testimony was another crack in the wall of fear. Then came October 29, 2025, Election Day. The result was a bad joke that nobody laughed at. Opposition leaders in jail. And the leader was just announced. The same international observers are calling it peaceful. The same Western headlines applauding stability. The same lie, recycled. But this time, something was different. People didn't buy it. They didn't even bother pretending. The illusion had shattered. Because you can fake numbers, but you can't fake awareness. Tanzanians had seen behind the curtain, and that's when the story of Tesha stopped being about one country. His defiance resonated across borders. Africans from Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Guinea began calling him the Invisible Captain. He became part of a larger idea, the idea that Africa's new revolution doesn't need coups or armies. It needs light. It needs exposure. It needs young Africans willing to say, "We see you, and we're not afraid anymore." From Dar es Salaam to Ouagadougou, from Nairobi to Bamako, that spirit spread, a quiet rebellion built on phones and truth. Tesha's disappearance was supposed to scare people. Instead, it reminded them of something ancient. You can kill a man, but you can't kill a moment whose time has come. So here's where Tanzania stands now, bruised, watching, waiting. A nation pretending to be calm while its youth learn to organize in plain sight. The old generation clings to power. The new one wields visibility. One rules with fear, the other with light. And that's why the story isn't over. Because one question still hangs in the air, quietly but persistently, like the echo of Tesha's final broadcast. When a person finally learns to see their chains, how long can their masters pretend they're free? Do you think Captain Tesha was reckless, or was he just the first one brave enough to say what everyone else was thinking? Let us know in the comment section. If your own government silenced truth in the name of unity, would you still stay quiet? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.